Hello and welcome to the Register's editorial board interview of former Lieutenant Governor Patty Judge, who is running as a Democrat for the U.S. Senate. So welcome. First of all, I'm Lynn Hicks, the opinion editor, and we'll go around and have everyone present introduce themselves.
I'm Clark Kaufman. I'm an editorial writer here at the paper.
Anna Backstrom, politics content strategist.
Sam Recker, Patty's campaign manager.
Jason Noble, politics reporter.
Kathy Obradovich, political columnist.
Brian Smith, engagement editor.
David Shivers, president.
Emily Nash, executive editor.
Great. Nice to see all of you this morning.
So we'll start off. Why should we consider endorsing you as the Democratic nominee for Senate?
Well, I think I've been on the statewide scene for a long time. This is the 5th time that I will be on a state ballot. And people are familiar with me. They know what I have done throughout my political career, particularly the last 4 years that I was in the governor's office, the work that we did with flood recovery, with preschool for kids, civil rights issues. So I've got a strong resume, and I think I look forward to the next step in that journey.
Talk about your time as lieutenant governor, and what would you say is what you brought to that office and what your role was?
Well, when we took office, one of the things I asked Governor Culver was to be the Homeland Security advisor to the state. And the reason I did that, Lynn, is that for the years after 9/11, when I was Secretary of Agriculture, I was one of 2 secretaries of agriculture in the United States that were asked to be part of standing up a sector on food security within the Department of Homeland Security. And so I had been working in that framework and realized the importance of that agency and what that we were doing there, and wanted to continue that work. So as Homeland Security advisor to the state, I think the floods of 2008, we did have some here. It certainly was not the impact that the eastern part of the state felt. And that flood response and recovery in the eastern part of Iowa, I think, was incredible. First of all, the floods were unbelievable. But the way Iowa pulled together and the way we were able to restore those communities, particularly Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, as quickly as we did is quite remarkable. And I'm proud of the role that I played in that.
Okay. As you've launched you've launched some advertisements regarding Senator Grassley and his role in the Supreme Court nomination.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of the other bigger issues that you think that you're running on this campaign?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are so many issues that are in front of us today, and there is such a feeling of frustration and unhappiness among the voter. I think we see that on both sides of the political aisle this political season. People are concerned. They know that their wages are stagnant. The buying power is not there that was there a few years ago. They are concerned about the safety of Social Security. Is that going to be there as it was promised throughout their working career? Medicare, is it going to be there? Is the Affordable Care Act going to work for them? Are they going to be able to get their kids through college? And what kind of debt will those young professionals have after they graduate from college? All of those things are on people's minds, and they are issues that directly affect this election. They are issues that need to be discussed in the United States Senate, truthfully.
So what was going through your mind as you were debating whether to run for this office?
Well, I had, after leaving in 2011 and going back to our hometown of Albia in 2012, thinking that I probably would not be on a ballot again, although staying very active in Democratic politics. I will admit that I never left Democratic politics and was out as a surrogate for the president, for Bruce Braley and other candidates through the years. But I became just increasingly frustrated with the obstructionism that I was seeing in the United States Senate. You know, I've known Chuck Grassley for a long time, worked closely with him, particularly the years that I was in the Department of Agriculture. I kind of was in the catbird seat because I had two United States senators at that point in time on the Senate Ag Committee, and I could call on both of them, both Tom Harkin and Chuck Grassley, for advice, for help with any kind of issues here in Iowa, agricultural issues that had a federal implication. I was in and out of their offices, and I appreciate him very much, but I really have seen in the last few years a moving to the right by Senator Grassley of really becoming part of the Washington establishment and not really paying the attention, in my opinion, to the issues that are concerning Iowans any longer. With the death of Scalia and his almost immediate reaction of telling the world that he would not have hearings, I said, enough's enough. He should not be doing that. He needs to be seriously held accountable, and I said I'm ready to join the race.
What are your thoughts on the water quality debate going on in Iowa? What do you think needs to be done there?
Well, I have said clearly that I think that we should have enacted legislation this year in the Iowa legislature to fund the Conservation Reserve Trust, that trust fund, and the language was 3/8 of a cent. If we had done that, it would have provided adequate amount of money to get a serious program going to work on water quality. We have a serious problem in Iowa, and in fact, we have a serious problem in the Midwest. It's not just an Iowa issue. It's kind of an issue from Minnesota down to New Orleans. But it's going to require serious commitment. I think the voters in Iowa understood that in 2010 when we put that constitutional amendment on the ballot. It passed overwhelmingly, and I think people were ready for that work to begin. It's going to take research. We have to know, and I will try not to just get bogged down in how to farm today, but you know, there are a lot of things that farmers can do today to slow the flow of water. We need to be measuring what works best, what is effective. You know, how does that? How do we get the biggest bang for the dollar? And in order to do that, we're going to have that program on a federal level. I think we need to be looking very seriously at water quality in our country, and at where we're going to go in setting solid water quality programs through the EPA.
So how does that fit with you becoming a leader in the Iowa Partnership for Clean Water? Why did you do that, and what did you hope to accomplish through that?
Well, I have clearly stated, Lynn, that I do not think that lawsuits in this issue solve problems. I think what solves this problem is a serious commitment to water quality by the entire state. And I would like to have seen that piece of legislation brought out this year in the legislature discussed and passed in order to make a long-term serious commitment to cleaning up water. I don't think until we're ready to do that, we're going to move the needle, and that's really my fear about what's going on. When I decided I was a candidate, I stepped back from all sorts of of things that I was involved in order to make sure that my candidacy was not part of the agenda. But I have always maintained that that lawsuit does not solve a problem.
So what do you think that your involvement in that group is doing to address this issue?
Well, I'm not involved in the group,
Right.
and have not been involved in the group for
But you were
many
involved when
months.
this debate was going on, as well as in the legislature, and you were involved when they were running advertising.
I was involved in the beginning of this. I was involved. I had hoped that it would be a conduit to conversation. We did have one discussion, last summer, I believe, where we had people from both sides of the issue in. I thought we had a good discussion. I am disappointed that there were not more discussions, because I really believe that we will not change this dynamic if we're not willing to sit down and look for some solutions that everyone can agree upon.
There's an argument to be made that the kind of commitment that you're talking about requires more than just discussion. That
Absolutely.
That government actually needs to play a role in
And I agree with
mandatory
that.
standards and that kind of
I absolutely agree with that, Clark. There is a role for government. As the Secretary of Agriculture for 8 years, I will tell you that that conservation programs and water quality programs that were operated in the Department of Agriculture were starved. It was every year going and trying to get enough money to run a cost share program, which is one of the most effective programs that we've had long term in the state of Iowa. And that cost share is, it's the farmer puts in dollars, the state of Iowa puts in dollars. Sometimes even we have some federal dollars, but it is for long-term conservation management or structures on farms that conserve soil and protect water. So we have talked a lot about this, but we have really refused to think about it seriously and long term. You cannot change this problem overnight. This is a long-term commitment. Again, as a United States Senator, I think that there is a role for the federal government. This is not an Iowa-only issue. The water starts running up in Minnesota, and it runs all the way down to New Orleans, and we need to collaborate with all of the states in that corridor to try to improve the situation for everyone.
If you were
Just to
on
clarify, you were still co-chair, I believe, when they were running some of the ads, for example, that were attacking Bill Stowe and others. I mean, do you think that was the right way to go into address this issue?
I'm never a fan of huge proponent of negative advertising. I will tell you, when you are the co-chair of one of those groups like that, usually that means that you are a public face, and I accepted that. I certainly was not there on the daily workings of that group. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that we had a lawsuit. I think it's unfortunate that we had negative advertising. I think it's really unfortunate that we let an opportunity get by us this year to do something meaningful. For all of the advertising, for all of the money that's been spent on a lawsuit, for all the rhetoric, we have not moved the needle one bit. We are exactly where we were a year ago.
You mentioned that you're not a fan of attack ads, but the only ad that you're running on TV right now is an attack ad against Chuck Grassley. How does that align with those views?
Well, I'm glad you saw it because it's a web video. You know, when I decided I was going to challenge Chuck Grassley, I knew that this was going to be a tough race, and I knew that it I would not be able to just run a nice picture of my family and I sitting under on a park bench someplace and win this race. This is going to require defining the senator where he is today. You know, he has changed. He's moved. He's moved to the right, and that is the job now of my campaign, to help Iowa understand that. You know, I had been in this race less than a day when they started running videos of me supposedly that I had gone to Washington. I was a person that's lived in and worked in Iowa for, I admit, over 70 years.
You have taken some criticism for supposedly being backed by Washington establishment as opposed to Iowa lawmakers, state lawmakers, and that kind of thing. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, Iowa lawmakers had pretty much decided what they were going to do before they even knew that I was going to get into this race, and I understand. I appreciate that. That's fine. Again, I am challenging a 36-year incumbent who is the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, one of the most powerful committees in our federal government. Going into that race, I am very gladly going to take the help from other senators, from people across the state of Iowa, anyone whose beliefs and views agree with mine. I'm certainly going to be very grateful for the help.
So you know it's going to be a tough race. What's it going to take for you to win?
We believe that we have put together a very solid campaign plan. It will be a tough race. We also know that it's not a race that's undoable. We have examined that pretty closely too, and Senator Grassley's favorabilities, which have always been high in Iowa, are not what they were even a few months ago. He is vulnerable. He knows that. I know that. And I think with a solid campaign plan and with a good staff that I've been able to put together, that we're going to be able to be successful.
What does that plan entail?
It is going to entail all kinds of media. You know, this will be a full-scale campaign.
How does digital play into that plan? Right now your website's pretty scarce on information. There's not a lot of policies out there, especially for those younger voters who might not have known your tenure previously. Again,
we jumped in this race in March, and we have been moving, I think, at a very rapid speed since that time. And I know the website has not got as much content on it as I would like. I will tell you that very, very soon, within a few days, that's going to change because we've gotten that content ready now. You know, this whole social media thing to me is very new and rather exciting. But even when I ran the last time in 2010 with Chet Culver, it was just in its infancy. You know, we had a website up, but it wasn't much, and people really didn't spend a lot of time looking at it or adding content to it. Fundraising via the whole social media thing was unknown. The only person that had ever done it was Barack Obama, and it was something that people were talking about but really didn't use. And Twitter, my gosh, nobody knew what Twitter was. And so when I got in this race, all of these bright millennials that are helping me said, well, you have to Twitter, or tweet. You have to tweet. And I said, well, I don't know how to do that. So they said, well, we will show you. So I have been tweeting and learning, and it is a very powerful tool. Social media is a very powerful tool, and we're using it, and we will have more information for you very quickly on the website.
What are the key messages you think are important to connect with Iowans to win this race?
Well, I think I spoke just a little bit about that, but I think the key messages are, first of all, people are concerned about jobs and about the economy growing. They are legitimately worried that their paycheck does not have the buying power that it had a few years ago. They're also worried about the cost of education. One of the things that I am very concerned about is how much it is costing to get a college education, and the fact that so many of the college graduates are graduating with just what, in my opinion, astronomical student loan debts. Oftentimes six-figure student loan debts, and those debts are financed 7, 8. I even talked to a young man the other day in Newton whose student loan debt was at 10%. He is in the process of trying to get something done about that, but this is way too high. I don't understand why, and I think this is an issue that people are legitimately concerned about it.
Well, give us some specific proposals, because
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say you're concerned about wages, you're concerned about education, you're concerned about the environment.
Well, let's
what
go
specifically are you
to
doing?
education. First of all, we need to increase Pell Grants. We've got to federally have the ability for students, graduates, to refinance those loans at a competitive loan rate instead of being locked into a rate that is not competitive. I would certainly look at a proposal for tuition-free community college for 2 years, if the students kept a high grade point average. I don't think we need to finance people who are not going to participate and actually work hard at going to college. So that would open some doors if people were able to get that first 2 years free or relatively cheap, so for the last 2 years, which would be at a higher rate. So those are a few things that could be done. But I think, Kathy, the most important thing of those right now today is looking at why that student loan rate is so high, and why that cannot be brought down and made competitive. I don't understand that. I don't understand why that is that way, and as in the United States Senate, certainly something would want to know what is the reluctance to change that.
What about jobs and wages? Can you give us some?
Well, let's raise the minimum wage. That will do as much to spur growth as anything, I believe. The last time the minimum wage was raised in Iowa was raised to $7.25, and that was in the first year of the Culver-Judge administration. We were very proud to do that. We were very proud of the fact that 250,000 Iowans got a raise that day because we did that.
What do you want to raise it to?
I would like to see that raised to $15. I think when we raise that minimum wage, then we start, when it's an all ships rising, then wages start to take off again. People start having more buying power, and contributing more into the economy. If you buy more, we'll have more dollars going around in the economy. But I think the first thing we have to do is understand that we have to raise the minimum wage.
And you're
That
talking
wage
about the
disparity.
federal-
Yes, I'm talking about federally now. The wage disparity today is at an all-time high between the top wage earners and the bottom wage earners. We need to bridge that gap.
Why do you think 15 is the right number for the whole country? Cost of living in Iowa might be lower than it is in California, or
I think we need a standardized wage. People are very mobile today. I think it will work much better to spur the national economy if we have a national minimum wage. And I believe $15 an hour is a good place to put that. It's certainly not sky high, but it is a place that starts to make a wage that people can talk about living on.
You mentioned Social Security and Medicare is one of the other concerns that you're hearing about from Iowans. What can the federal government, or what should the federal government do there in terms of either eligibility or benefits?
Well, the first thing that we need to do on Social Security is we need to raise the cap. The cap on Social Security at $118,000 is artificially low. That needs to be gone. So that wage earners that are making more than that are paying their fair share into the system. I think if we do that, the system starts becoming healthy much quicker. The other thing that I really feel very strongly about is that we should not ever risk Social Security in the stock market. That should not be privatized. That is a function. That is best as a function of government and should be left there.
You say raise the cap or eliminate it?
Well, I think that eliminating it probably is the best thing to do. But you know, again, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that when you sit down at a table, sometimes you need to be able to negotiate. I think that's one of the strengths that I bring to this endeavor, is that I have been able to negotiate in the past. And so I would entertain raising the cap, with my own preference being that we eliminate it. But the issue really is getting the wage earner that is making $120,000, $150,000, or $200,000 or more paying in a fair share into that system. You know, someone who's making $35,000 a year is paying a percentage of their entire wage, and that's just not fair.
Is it possible to make Social Security solvent for the foreseeable future just by doing that, and without taking other steps like reducing benefits, et cetera?
I would like to try this first. I would oppose at this point in time any reduction in benefits. You know, that Social Security is a contract that we enter into with our employers and with the United States government. We have money withheld out of every paycheck with the idea that when we retire, that money is available to us. This is not a government giveaway program in any way. This is the money that we have paid in and the money that our employer has paid in over our working lifetime. So in no way should that be jeopardized or the benefits lessened. But the first thing we need to do is remove the artificial cap and start having people pay in a fair share.
You mentioned the Affordable Care Act as well, and people's concerns about that. Is that something that you think needs to be revised, tweaked, overhauled?
Well, it certainly can be tweaked. We certainly should not be thinking for a minute that we would get rid of the Affordable Care Act. We're proving every day that is providing health insurance benefits to people who would otherwise not have insurance, and so we have taken a huge step. But with any piece of huge legislation like the Affordable Care Act, there are always things that you need to go back and re-examine and perhaps revise a bit. And one of the things that comes to my mind first is the cost of drugs. I think that we did not probably within that bill adequately control the cost of prescription drugs. Again, that's a tough decision to have. I've been around long enough to remember the ads that were run against Hillary Clinton back in the beginning of the Clinton administration when they tried to control drug costs. But it does need to be done. It does need to be examined. And another issue along healthcare that I'm hearing as I'm traveling across the state and talking to people is the critical problems that we have in mental health care delivery. We have just got such a fragmented system, and in many communities, just simply non-existent system for providing mental health care. I think this is a national issue too, but it is certainly one that we need to examine. How do we get that mental health care delivered to people across the state? And truthfully, we're failing right now, and people are falling through the cracks every day.
And do you have a proposal specifically for how to do that?
Well, we've got to get a stronger mental health or stronger community-based mental health systems. And again, I've been gone long enough that I don't know the pattern now within DHS here in Iowa, but we need to be training mental health professionals, getting them out in the field. I mean, story after story, Kathy, of waiting lists, of no one available at all in communities across the state, of people going to emergency rooms because there is no other alternative, presenting in the emergency room, being found in need of mental health services, then using law enforcement in order to transport people, tying up law enforcement for hours and hours or days, and this isn't working. It's not working in Iowa, and I would guess that it is not working across this country.
What is your feeling on the VA health system? Do you think that needs to be improved? Do you think it should be gotten rid of and veterans can simply get services at whatever hospital they choose? What would you do there?
Well, that's a great question. Because, first of all, my father is 94. He's a World War II vet, and I have had have gone through some things at the VA with him. And I want to say first off that the things that they have done for him, they were great. But again, it's not working well. Too long a lines, too long a time, and veterans need to be able to get in and get the services quickly. I think there should be that option of going to a private provider and having the VA then involved with some sort of a card system. I think there probably still would be a place for some VA hospitals too.
But maybe fewer?
But probably fewer.
I'm sure you've heard the complaints from Iowa farmers about the EPA and clean water standards and how they define navigable streams and that kind of thing. What are your feelings about the EPA? Is it reaching too far?
Well, again, we've got a serious water quality problem, and the EPA is going to have to be part of that solution. And I would, again, as a United States Senator, that is an issue that I think would be important to me. I would hope to be on the Senate Ag Committee and be able to have a voice in setting the next farm bill, which will begin in January. And as we discuss the farm bill, we are going to have that discussion about navigable waters. What are the waters? What waters of the United States means? How do we regulate that? How much is too much, or how much is necessary? I don't think we're going to be able to have the luxury in the future of ignoring that. We're at a crisis point, and the EPA is going to have to be part of the solution.
Do you agree with EPA's current definition of waters of the U.S.?
I think they're probably on target. I know a lot of my agricultural people, friends, don't agree with me on that. But again, we are at a point where we are going to have to be serious about improving water quality.
We hear, some of the complaints are that ditches and ravines where there's just standing water are being held to this higher standard now. Is there any legitimacy? to
Well,
this?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard that argument too. I'm not sure that there is a lot of validity to the fact that a ditch is being confused with a stream.
Right.
Again, these are issues that need to be looked at and definitely within the context of the next farm bill seriously addressed.
Talk a little more about agriculture, and you've been involved in the debate over hog confinements and the pork industry in the state. We just saw Mason City reject this new pork processing plan. And was that the right decision? And what do you think is the right approach to this issue about both confinements as well as processing plants and the concerns?
Well, I think, yeah, Mason City made a decision, and
Was it right?
Based on the decision of the city council there, it was the right decision, and I would support local control on that. We set some frameworks up. At the time I was in the Iowa Senate, and then there were other frameworks set when I was in the Department of Agriculture. But definitely a city council has the right to have a hearing, to listen to the citizens, and to make a decision about whether or not they locate a plant in their city, and whether that's a widget factory or a pork processor or whatever. That's local control, and I certainly support their decision.
And also local control as far as citing of.
Well, and again, we set that framework which allows now boards of supervisors to have a much stronger input. When we started, and I get back in the weeds too far, but when we started trying to think about regulating confinement feeding of hogs in the state of Iowa, it was as we came out of a farm crisis and the whole industry started vertically integrating. That was not a decision that farmers in Iowa made. It was something that happened because of policies that were set in Washington, D.C. that caused the collapse of a financing system for Iowa farmers. And then, of course, when you have a void, usually something will come and fill the void, whether it's something good or something bad. We had people come in here very quickly with vertical integration of livestock feeding, and they acted as to a farmer who could not get credit coming out of the farm crisis. I will supply you with pigs to feed. I will supply you with the feed, and I will supply you with a market. So what you have to do is we're going to build a building on your farm. You feed those little pigs, and then I'll give you something at the end after I sell them. Truthfully, those early contracts were very badly written, and what the farmers got out of it was almost nothing. The buildings were put up in a very haphazard manner. The science was not good, and some of the people that were operating at that point in time as integrators were not people that are any longer in our state, and they were people that were not very careful or cared too much about what happened to the environment here. We started working on this issue when I was in the state Senate. We started trying to set construction standards, distance requirements, various ways to make certain that we were controlling nuisance factors for neighbors. Those early confinements were using lagoons, manure storage lagoons, and that was not particularly a good thing, particularly for neighbors. And we were also doing a lot of, at that time there was a lot of aerial application of manure to farm fields, just things that were really not acceptable and created a nuisance. So we have worked on those issues. We have tried to refine. The industry itself has refined over the years, and now, you know, with the buildings that are being built, there are deep pits underneath those buildings, and the manure is applied at regulated times during the year. And we've come a long, long ways. Now, hogs still smell, and I think we all know that. So, you know, again, because of that and because of people's concerns, we have the siding regulations that require a builder to get permission from a county board of supervisors to go in to give neighbors the opportunity to put their input, and then the supervisors make that decision.
What are your thoughts on climate change and the role of the federal government?
Well, climate change is real, unlike some of the Republicans would like us to believe. It is very real. It is happening. And I think there is a serious role for the federal government. In fact, that's where it has to be. On something of this magnitude, cannot be a state-by-state solution. The thing that I think is the first and most critical piece for this country is to start trying to move away from fossil fuels. And Iowa has been a leader in that, and I'm very proud of the role that I have played over the years in the development of renewable fuels and wind energy and solar energy, particularly renewable fuels and wind energy. We can't let up, and again, it requires a commitment, a federal commitment. It requires, it's going to require additional research because that science is only getting better. The science in the beginning on ethanol production, you know, there's a lot of criticism. How much corn are you using? How much fossil fuel are you using to produce a gallon of ethanol? It's much better. You know, it has changed as the years have gone by. The idea in the beginning was that we needed to find another avenue for corn, for the use of corn, to raise the corn price, add value to a bushel of corn, that we were exporting too much of Iowa's product down the Mississippi River and into the Gulf in raw form, and taking a low dollar, the low dollar, which sometimes was almost at or below cost of production. So what can we do to add value here? And this is one of the things we can do. The criticism that came back to us almost immediately was, that's going to end up only, again, benefiting large agriculture, because they're going to be the ones that are going to make the ethanol. So we put a framework in effect that allowed farmers, co-ops, and local communities to invest and build ethanol plants, and there was some help from the state government in doing that, and that worked very, very well. A lot of those plants are still in operation today. Those processes have been refined so that there really is a much more efficient use of a bushel of corn in getting the ethanol, plus the byproduct, the co-product of distiller's grain coming out of there is good quality feed also.
Follow up on that. Your opponent Rob Hogue told us a couple weeks ago that he would support a cap and trade program and or a carbon tax. Do you support either one of those as a way to address climate change?
Yes, I would support them. I will tell you, I would support them because I believe that climate change is real and that we have to be serious, and those are tools that we should have in the toolbox. After I say it, I'm going to say that I have never been a huge proponent of cap and trade for the simple reason that somehow the whole premise sort of bothers me. The idea that some multinational company that has limitless dollars can buy their way out of a situation where they are being a polluter, and so that bothers me. So I think that if we're talking about cap and trade, we really have to carefully define what that means and how far we are willing to let someone go in that scheme.
So a carbon fee and rebate kind of scheme would be, you would be more supportive?
I probably would support that easier, yes.
In terms of your opponents in the primary, do you think the differences between you are largely based on experience, or does it have more to do with issues, or?
I think it probably has more to do with experience than issues. We're all Democrats. I think we all really understand the important issues today, both the environmental issues that we've just talked about, the job issues, the healthcare issues, Social Security. One we haven't talked about, immigration. I think we're all pretty close on most of those issues. Where we differ is in experience and in the ability to put a campaign together to go from now until November to seriously challenge and defeat a 36-year incumbent. And I think clearly I am the only person in the race that can do that, and that's been demonstrated thus far.
By your fundraising?
By fundraising, by organization, by people we've been able to get put together in, 2 months, 2.5 months?
You mentioned that one of the concerns you're hearing from Iowans is that the federal government isn't working. But as a freshman senator who may be in the minority party, how would you go about trying to change that?
Well, first of all, I would like to think I was going not in the minority party. That would be the first step, because this obstructionism that's going on, and it doesn't just have to do with the Supreme Court. It has to do with literally every important issue that Barack Obama has tried to bring forth since he's been the president for almost 8 years now. And that has to end. That's what people are so unhappy about. They think things just don't work. That's why Donald Trump, with some of the things that he says that are just so offensive, people say, well, but at least he's saying something. So clearly we have to get back to having a debate in our Senate. We have to be able to talk, to articulate our views, to listen to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, to sit down around a table like this with some of them and try to craft some solutions to problems that are palatable to both sides of an issue. And that's something I've done. I've done that for a long time, for 20 years, over 20 years. I've always been a person that could reach out, could try to help craft consensus. Part of that goes to the fact that I did have some pretty extensive training in mediation back in the farm crisis, and I worked as a mediator for a few years, starting out mediating for the Iowa Farmer Creditor Mediation Service, restructuring debts between farmers and their creditors when we could, and when we couldn't, to try to help farmers find ways to end their farming practices in a way that allowed them to go on with their lives. I got a good taste of that, and I found that to be such an important tool that then I went ahead and did some other types of mediation too. And I think having done some family mediation off and on during those years, I will tell you that if you can mediate a discussion and an agreement between two parents over the custody of children successfully, that, you know, that's going to give you some background going into the United States Senate to start trying to work across the aisle with people that don't necessarily have the same views.
Have you worked at all with Senator Ernst on anything?
You know, I have never had the opportunity to work with the senator. She was not in the Senate, or was not present when I was there, and so I have met her, shook hands with her a number of times, but I've really never worked with her. Look forward to doing that.
You mentioned immigration as one issue that we haven't talked about much yet. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe that we need to reform immigration in our country. I certainly do not believe that we need to build walls between us and Mexico. I think that we need to find some paths to citizenship for people in our country and in our state, right here in Iowa, that are living in the shadows today. They are presently working here, and they are raising their children here. And we need to figure out what we can do so that they can become legal citizens and pay taxes and really be a performing part of society.
How's that different than amnesty?
I think there may need to be some structure, that there may be some hoops there, some fines, something that have to be taken care of. I don't know that everyone gets a free pass, but if you have lived here for 10, 15, 20 years, clearly the idea of you going back someplace is not workable either. And people that have been born here, what we call the dreamers, definitely need to be part of our society and educated here.
You said we don't need a wall, but are you ruling out the need for more border security?
No, I am not ruling out the need for border security. Definitely, we need to be sure that people who are coming into our country are coming in here properly, that they have the documentation that they're supposed to have, and that people are not coming in here with the intent of criminal intent. And but I don't think that is what Donald Trump is talking about when he's talking about building a wall. I think that there is a place always for border security.
What role is Donald Trump going to play in this Senate race here in Iowa?
Well, Chuck Grassley has stood up and introduced him on a stage. It was my understanding that he has not said that he would not endorse him. I think that it will be an interesting race with Donald Trump on the top of the ticket, and I can't see that plays very well in Iowa. You know, Iowans have generally, we are pretty friendly people. We are not people that yell and say mean things to each other, and I don't think that that will do Donald Trump or Chuck Grassley any good in Iowa, as evidenced by the caucuses when he did not win the Iowa caucuses.
But he came in second, so he certainly.
Yeah, he has the supporters, and believe me, I live in rural Iowa, and I know that he has supporters all over the state, but I do believe that he will not be an asset, and I do believe that the Democrats will win Iowa.
Talk a little bit about trade. You've said that you would, at this point, you would vote against the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yes.
Which is very important to Iowa agriculture.
Yes.
So what is your approach going to be toward both that deal and in general
Sure.
on trade?
Good question. Iowa is an agricultural export state, and Iowa, we have to continue to have export markets for our products here. And so I've always believed that we needed to trade, and we need to trade in the future, and certainly the Trans-Pacific partners are people that are huge agricultural trade partners. That particular piece of legislation, and I really have tried to do some reviewing of that, it is, I'm not sure that it really puts the environmental issues on the table the way they need to be put on the table. I'm not sure that it is really a fair trade for workers in the United States. And probably the thing that bothers me the most about this is the issue of currency manipulation, and particularly with China. You know, there's some sort of, well, maybe there's sort of a gentleman's agreement or something that we're not going to allow currency manipulation, but there are no teeth in this agreement.
But I mean, China is not a party to the TPP anyway, so I don't understand, what does that have to do with
Well, I mean,
China?
I guess China is not, but currency manipulation is a very serious issue and very easy to do. You know, to manipulate your currency so that you can increase your exports, and then put the agreement like the TPP just kind of askew. And we really have got to have some. There has to be some teeth in there, some kind of sanctions or something to keep people that are signing on to that from signing on and then manipulating their currency.
What about, what is your approach to foreign policy? Obviously, that's going to be a new experience for you, a learning curve as senator. So what are you doing to get up to speed on foreign policy and defense?
Well, I'm trying to read everything that I can get my hands on to read about foreign policy. Also, I do come into this with a little knowledge in my head from the 4 years I was Homeland Security Advisor. During that period of time, while my public face in that role was almost domestic and really dealing with natural disasters, on the other side of it, I was in a situation where I was being constantly briefed by our government on foreign policies, on potential threats to our country and to us here, because of course the major first thing always has to be safety. You know, before we talk about anything else, we have to be certain that we're safe. So I do come in with that framework. I have been tried to continue to keep up to date on issues, particularly terrorist activities, the Mideast situation, which is always a push-button situation, that's one of the areas, Lynn, that I really would, as a senator, besides wanting to be on the Senate Ag Committee for obvious reasons, I would really like to be able to work on those issues because of the background of many years of kind of being involved with it.
So if you got elected, who are a couple of people that you would reach out to first, just to collaborate, for counsel, for advice?
Well, probably one of the first people I would need to reach out to, and I already have done that and will continue to do that, is Tom Harkin, because of the incredible tenure he had here as our senator, his work in that role, and his just common sense political approach to issues. He is an advisor, and I value his counsel probably above most politicians today.
Well, what's his read on this election and what you need to be doing between now and November?
Well, Tom Harkin tells you, get up early, work all day, what is it? I can't remember all. To go to bed, get up early, and work all day again. Something like that. And then he tells you if you want to go forward, you put it in a D, and you put it in D, and if you want to go backwards, you put it in the R.
So any other advice he's giving you?
Oh, Tom is a great friend, and like I said, I'm very. I consider him my political hero, and I will continue to talk to him about issues as much as he will let me.
Anything we didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about?
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this morning, and we've covered a wide variety of things. I am eager for this race. I think it's an important race. It's important to have this dialogue with citizens in this state and talk to them about how we can make this government work for us again. So thank you very much, all of you. And anytime you have questions, feel free to get a hold of me.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.